thing. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Flying the thanks yet. Looking forward to weekend of quality rugby, Quinny. And a lot of the focus, obviously, in this game from a long way out has been in relation to Owen Farrell and his absence. Apparently, he's been running Johnny Sexton plays. If we believe what we hear in training this week, he's been replicating the Leinster at half and what he might bring to the game. So he's replaced by Alex Good. It seems he's a 15 naturally. Good on the front foot, obviously can't control, few players can, but can't control the game in the way that Farrell might. So just in relation to Farrell's absence, then Quinny, and how much of a dent that is, one that Saracens can recover from or no?
I'm not sure. I think Alex Good, as you said, is a very talented player, and but when you take Owen Farrell as world class, he's probably the best, one of the best, if not the best fly half in world rugby. His presence, his aggression, his physicality, all that kind of stuff makes Saracens, and he's a real leader for them. It makes them, it makes them tick really, and he's done brilliantly in that role for England and Saracens the last number of years. So he's a big loss. There's no doubt about it. It looks like Good will play at 10. Mano Vunapolo is the other option, but I think they'll go for the more experienced. That's what we're hearing. So he's a loss. I think his presence obviously is very important to Saracens, and in the training week and stuff like that. You mentioned Johnny Sexton and him not starting for Ulster the week before, or for the Ulster game the week before, and being around the team and stuff like that. It does have an effect, but ultimately it's what happens out in the field under pressure, and Farrell is really good under pressure, so he's a massive loss to them.
Yeah, does like with a player of that sort of significance, and they've obviously been without him now for a week or whatever, it's been 10 days, and have known about it, and so maybe they can tweak the game plan. But how much tweaking of the game plan do they do? Do they just say, listen, this is the way we play, and we might not have the same quality in terms of driving the game or controlling the game at 10, but we got to stick with that? Or do they try and tailor it to a different quarterback?
I don't think Saracens are going to change dramatically from what's been brought them success in the last couple of years. The personnel, obviously, from that final in May 2019 is going to be a bit different. There's probably 10 or 11 guys who were in the 23 that day who are not going to be involved. They're not going to be there. They're gone. They're moved on. Some of them are departed for good, some on loan. So it's a little bit different, but I don't think they're going to completely change the way they play. They play with a lot of pressure, use the kicking game very effectively, quite direct in their approach. And they try to out-muscle teams. Of course, they have, pace in their wings. Maitland and Lewington are very, very dangerous. Elliot Daly, if he gets enough a ball in his hands, can be very, very daily as well. But Saracens like to play a lot of territory, and Alex Good's kicking game wouldn't be as sharp and as accurate as Farrell. And it's those decisions under pressure is really important. It's what Farrell is very good at. So, in a sense, this is kind of the last shot for them. They go down into the championship next year. They'd love nothing more than to win the Champions Cup and really give the two fingers to everybody who's criticised them and called them cheats and, been negative towards them. So I think they're a very dangerous prospect.
Being realistic yes, towards them, I suppose.
That's what they are, yeah. That's what they are.
So just one last one on that 10. Like, we can't talk about Good as being some sort of greenhorn. Like, is he 30 odd, and he's like a player with 20 international caps under his belt. So, like, he's a player of experience. But at the same time, you talk about, like, making decisions under pressure. Like, I presume if you're Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster heading into this year, like, deploying your back row to barrel down that channel for the first 10, 15 minutes and put him back in his backside.
Yeah, you want to unsettle him. It's everybody does that with any fly half, I think, and that's what Leinster will do. They will try and. I think it's more the pressure game. We saw Van der Fleer shooting out of the line last week. It's just having somebody in his face as often as possible, and then forcing some errors from his kicks. Obviously, trying to run at him when you have the ball as well. So. Saracens will be conscious of that, and you always try and protect your fly half no matter what. You want him standing on his feet, even if it is Owen Farrell and he loves to tackle. The more times he gets the ball on his feet, moving, being able to look up. The great thing about Farrell is he makes really quick, good decisions on the fly. on the run. He likes to run kick a lot of the time, so he's hitting the ball full tilt, and he does a lot of punch kicks into the corner and in for space in behind. So Good is a very footballer and a very good footballer. Make no mistake about it. If he gets enough of quality ball, he's very, very dangerous. He's a running fly half more than a kicking fly half. So I think that's the rock they could perish on if they think that, there's a massive weakness here and we can just solely focus on him, because there's a lot of quality in that Saracen side anyway. And Leinster have got to take away any sort of momentum that they generate. They're a very similar team to Leinster in a sense. They take control of the tempo of the game very, very well, and that's what their success has been built on. And that's where they're dominant. When you're dominant, you can do that in rugby. So that'll be really intriguing, the physical kind of battle. Who has that tempo? Leinster have been unsettling the last couple of weeks themselves at the breakdown and a couple of line-out issues. So Saracens will target them as well. But obviously, you go after fly halves a lot. You go after scrum halves. You try and unsettle them because they're the main distributors and decision makers for any team.
What's the fix on the line-out issue, Alan? Is it the hooker? Is it who's calling the line-out? What's going on here?
I think it's a mixture, Ron. It's not a technique issue where Ronan Kelleher can't throw the ball into the line-out. Of course he can throw the ball in. It's just, I suppose it's a composure and a calmness when the pressure's on, when you've got to make decisions, when the opposition are kind of shouting and roaring and moving in the line-out, and they're throwing players up in the air. For me, looking at Leinster's line-out, and it wasn't that many, it's not that big of an issue, I don't think. It's just a timing issue, and it's a concentration issue with them. It's not about simplifying the line-out and just throwing it at two all the time. It's just making good line-out calls, and there's an onus on whoever's calling the line-out, whether that's James Ryan or Devin Toner or, Scott Farley, who plays in the second row, we're not sure yet. But who's calling the line-out, there's a clear and precise picture. And a lot of the time when your line-out malfunctions a little bit and you have a couple of issues, it's usually fixed the following week in training by really refocusing everybody, not just the line-out callers, the jumpers, but the lifters as well. So collectively, I think they will have addressed that, and that problem should be sorted out. You're always going to lose one or two in a game if the opposition are good at putting bodies in the air. And Itoje certainly, he's very vocal. He moves up and down a lot. Michael Rhodes can be lifted. Whether Swinson starts or who plays in the second row with Itoje it will be interesting. But they'll certainly try and pressurise Leinster. And, it'll be interesting to see if Leinster can fix that this week.
Yeah, and on that point, because we'd spoken even last weekend about Leinster not necessarily hitting their straps since the return, maybe a little bit more at the weekend, but again, the line-out kicking, is that the weakness? I was going to ask you, what is the weakness of this Leinster team if you're Mark McCall plotting here? Is that what it is? Is that what you're focusing on, or are there other areas that you think can be exposed, haven't seen them since their return?
Yeah, again, it's an area you can be let down because you look at the Munster match, Munster profited very much so on the kicking game in the first match, and then they focus a lot on that in the second game in the semi-final, and Leinster were very good at receiving it and catching it and blocking and retreating. So you can get kind of bogged down on focusing too much on a weakness that we've seen in a previous match, and then the team fixes it, and then you go, well, they're not supposed to be good at this, and suddenly they're good at it. So you've got to be very, very careful. I think all aspects of any sort of performance in rugby is important. The set piece is your fundamental part of the game that gives you your foundation. The line-out and the scrum, Leinster have got to make sure their line-out's a lot better, because that enables their attack game to really get the ball into Gary Ringrose's hands early, get him moving with a bit of width, and attacking off a very good platform. So they've got to get that right. Of course, if they start creaking early on, it can have a real negative effect and a downward spiral. But the other area for me is the breakdown. And even though Leinster haven't kind of changed gears and gone up into fourth or fifth gear, they've got to be a bit better at resourcing their own breakdown. Munster caused them a lot of problems and turned the ball over, slowed the ball down, and it was sloppy at times.
What does that mean, Quinny, to getting numbers in, is it?
Yeah, I just think it's the ball carrier. Again, there's an onus on the ball carrier, but it's also an enthusiasm and an energy to get in there and support players and realise that there's a serious threat there. Well, Jackson Ray is very good at the breakdown. Billy Vunipola, Michael Rhodes. Atoje is an absolute nuisance. So he really refocuses you and gets you alert to what's coming there at the breakdown. So Leinster, if they get good quality ball, and they've proven and shown us that in the last couple of years, that they're very, very hard when their resourcing of the breakdown is of a high standard. That's where they cause massive problems for teams, because it's very hard to get your defensive line, and it's what every team tries to do. Quick breakdown, defense doesn't get set, and then you can play rugby and gaps open up. If the breakdown is slow, the defensive line gets set, no matter what the level of the opposition, and they can run off the line and smash you and be physical. And then there's knock-ons, turnovers, the ball becomes loose, and it can have a negative effect. But, you know, Saracens are really going to target them in that area, and I think that's an area where Leinster need to get better. Their own resourcing of the ball and the numbers they send in, and that sometimes that's an identification issue. You know, in that semi-final against Munster, they looked at times where they got 3-4 phases. They had Munster under massive pressure, and then Munster in their own 22 or outside their 22, when Leinster looked like building a little bit of momentum, Munster was kind of hanging on. Munster forced a turnover or a knock-on, and you just feel the frustration watching it. And you can imagine what that's like as a player when you have a number of positive moments. You look like you're nearly getting there, and then these bloody guys have turned us over again, or we've made a mistake, or somebody's lost their concentration. So that's an area, you know, Munster or Leinster are capable of building 10, 12, 15 phases. We've seen that, and that's where they cause a lot of damage, and they do a lot of damage. And these top games and these big games, that's where you got to keep going. You got to be patient in holding on to the ball, and that's where they've got to get to on Saturday. Of course, you can score off first, second, third phase if somebody does something brilliant and the opposition switch off. But realistically, that's where they want to get to, into the double fingers of holding on to the ball, and then they'll get opportunities.
Yeah, these games tend to take on a bit of a life of their own, don't they, in terms of like the Irish-English thing. And I was listening to the BBC Rugby podcast this week, and they were talking about the Pro 14 being the equivalent of the Scottish Premiership in football. To be fair, the Scottish Premiership has been taken in the neck, left, right and centre this week. But they were saying that like that dominance, that Leinster dominance now is a bit like the Celtic dominance, which I think is a bit unfair. Like we're talking about a team of a generation rather than what's like outside of the top one, maybe two in Scotland, just being of poor quality. Which is the Gallagher Premiership or the Pro 14 the better tournament for quality?
We can't argue, sit here. I can't argue here and sit here. And the reality is there's Pro 14 games without the internationals at times throughout the season. Of course, there's meaningful games, but not enough of them for me. I think it's a hard situation to fix, because we'd love to see the internationals playing all the time in the Pro 14. It's not possible. We have a situation the last number of years where Munster and Leinster, which is one of the biggest derby games in club rugby for me in the world, is you see no huge number of changes and internationals not playing. So we as Pro 14 people, if you like, we can't sit here and say, well, you're wrong and the English Premiership is wrong and the quality here is way better. The quality is good if they all play, but the reality is they don't play often enough, and we get lots of games where we don't see the internationals. So there's an argument there that's very valid, that the quality isn't the same. I think if you put up Leinster, Munster, Ulster, Connacht against the English Premiership sides, Leinster, Ulster and Connacht, you know, win a lot of those games. Munster win a lot of those games. Leinster probably win all their games at the moment. But it's just when their top team is out. The Gallagher Premiership, I think there's an intensity to it, and there's a relentless intensity that they play every week. They play a lot more minutes. Their internationals over there. So that's where they're coming from as regards the intensity and the bite that's there week after week. We don't get that in the Pro 14, and that's just a reality. So it's a very relevant argument that, you know, the week before lots of European games, and we've seen it over the years, the Irish provinces are able to rest their players, where the guys in the Premiership teams, they just can't do that, or in France at times as well.
What about the Ulster game this weekend, Quinny? What are you thinking? It's like there's a doubt over Coetzee, which might be the most pivotal thing here, but they're off to Toulouse. Raj got a look at them last weekend, and it didn't go that well for him. I don't know if you've been chatting to him, but like, what's your sense of how that one goes?
Well, look, Toulouse are very dangerous. You look at the teams they played in the last couple of weeks. There's no real changes in who they've had last year. They haven't signed a raft of guys. They're a very, very dangerous side, a powerful side as well. And if they get their flow, they can destroy any team. I just get a sense that Ulster have a chance here, not based on form, but based on ability, if that makes sense. I think the free-flowing kind of style and game that we're going to see on Sunday will actually suit Ulster. That the ball has been thrown around a little bit, and they won't have the same kind of pressure that they had last weekend against Leinster. The same sort of organisation. I'm not saying Toulouse are a bad defensive side, but Toulouse, and it's a kind of a French thing, really. They still believe they'll score more than you, even if you score against them. So they're very, very attack focused. If Ulster are solid and connected in defence, and they defend well together and stay in the game, you know, they can score tries. They can create chaos for Toulouse, but there are a lot of ifs and buts there. The reality is it's very, very unlikely that they'll get a win, but I think they have a real opportunity here to throw the kitchen sink at this in a way, in an ambitious way, if you like. If they go thinking they're going to contain Toulouse and sit back and just, you know, not have a go themselves, it's not going to work for them. I think it will suit them the way the game will pan out, that they have an ability to score tries. And in fairness, even against Leinster last week, you could see they were building lots and lots and lots and lots of phases, and they were maybe one offload or one pass away from getting that clean line break or maybe scoring that try. Toulouse's defence is not as good as Leinster. That's the reality. So if they can do the same things, particularly what they did in the first half last week, and if they get a try or two and get a bit of confidence in themselves, they have a really good chance.
And what way are you going for both of those? How are you calling it?
It'll be Leinster-Toulouse, I think. That's the reality. I think there, of course, and this, I think most people know this, Saracens are a very, very dangerous situation for Leinster. And if Leinster underestimate him in any way or underperform or don't increase their level of performance, they're actually vulnerable. There's a vulnerability there, because the issue for Saracens is, and that what happened in that final last year was the impact off the bench, the power that they can bring off the bench. Saracens won't be able to bring the same sort of power off the bench. So Leinster have got to be physical and really kind of bring the pain threshold up to a level that Saracens just feel that they wear them out, basically. You know, the Vunapolas and the Toja, as I said, and Jackson Ray and Jamie George, these are, you know, top quality players who won't be daunted by, you know, what's happened before, or what Leinster have won 25 games. They'll be fancying their chances. So I think it'll be tight. And the longer Saracens are in the game, if they're in the game late on in the game, I think that makes them more dangerous. So I think Leinster need to get the scoreboard taken over with penalties, if it is penalties. And, you know, Leinster don't have to get this wonderful game tomorrow. They just need to win, play cup rugby, play in the right areas. And if that means knocking the ball over with penalties, fair enough. It doesn't matter, because they just need to win the game and simplify things at times. You'd love to see their attack going up a level. And like I said about the breakdown, if their breakdown is good, they can do that. So I think Leinster will get over the line. And there's just some part of me thinks Ulster have a great chance, but the reality is it'll probably be Toulouse. So it'll be Leinster.
You're covering all bases there, Quinny.
I'm not. I'm picking Toulouse to win, and I'm picking Leinster to win. But I just think I'd love to be a Leinster Ulster player. You know, I love these matches are going away when people write you off and you're going to the south of France, and you know the atmosphere, and there'll be the crowd. I'm not sure how many they're going to let into it in France. There'll be a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand, but it's not going to be a rollicking stadium where the crowd are kind of hanging over the wire, and so it neutralises that home advantage a little bit. But Toulouse are a wonderful side. Chelson Colby, if he gets the ball, he can destroy any team. We know what he can do. Dupont at scrum half is probably the best scrum half in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, they've got Kanu, some wonderful players there. Ramos, Huge, you know, you can rattle off all the internationals, the quality they have. So, you know, that kind of refocuses you and thinks, well, they can't do it.
Yeah, we shall see. We'll hold you to your feet to the flames next week, Quinny. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
Thanks a lot, Alan Quinlan, looking ahead to the weekend's Heineken Cup action and calling it for Leinster and Toulouse. So we'll see how that pans out. We're going to keep it rugby next. We're talking to the new Connacht Rugby president on the way after these.
OTB